welcome to Distribution Strategy Group's Best Practice Series, the 2025 State of Distributor Profitability. Our special expert today, we're honored to have Dr. Al Bates, whom I will introduce in a few moments here. I wanted to just say a thing about profitability, which is that, as many of you know, distributors are not in business for charitable reasons. We're in business to make a profit. There are a number of elements to profitability beyond buy low, sell high, although that is part of what's going to be discussed and some of the techniques for doing that Dr. Bates is going to share with us today. Before we introduce Dr. Bates, I'd like to share a word from our sponsors for this webinar. It is sponsored by Cavallo, Net at Work, and Oracle NetSuite. Coming up in June, we've got a Applied AI for Distributors 2025. That's June 24 to 26 in Chicago. There's a Marriott right near the airport. You can scan the QR code. And we're really going to be looking at how you can AI enable your business, whether it's through large language models, whether it's through applications available from the sponsors here today and others. Really where AI is in distribution today, and then how do we go from really enthusiasm to execution? We've got a terrific lineup of speakers, including Trent Gillespie, CEO of Stellus AI, Don Sarno, SVP of Digital at Sonopar North America, and Noel Russell, founder of AI Leadership Institute. I'd like to introduce Mike Bewer from Cavallo next to talk about Cavallo. Mike. Okay, I'd like to introduce Net at Work, Daniel Edwards. Daniel?
Jonathan, good morning. Good day, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. Again, my name is Daniel Edwards. I'm the Practice Director for the NetSuite Business Unit here at Net at Work. And Jonathan, you can go to the next slide real quick. A little bit about Net at Work. We are a transformative technology organization. That's the best way to put it. We have about 450 team members, mostly located here in the United States, crossing a range of technologies that really enable your organization to take advantage of what I would call the modern IT stack, whether that is a modern ERP, like I represent Oracle NetSuite at the organization, or if you're looking at human capital management, managed services, or hosted. We like to think of us as your single source of success when it comes to building that stack, whether it's an application or e-commerce. And you can go to the next slide again real quick, Jonathan. So this is what we call, whether you want to call it the composable ERP or whatever new moniker you want to attach to it, but essentially it's a full suite of solutions that we want to bring to the table. We don't just want to be the guy that sells you one solution and takes you live. We want to talk to you about how we can partner with you to transform your organization, to be able to take advantage of technologies like Jonathan was just mentioning, artificial intelligence, and what does that stack look like across your organization to be able to take advantage of those technologies. Jonathan, thank you again. I appreciate the invitation for coming today. If you have any questions, here's our information. And would love to speak to you guys at any point in time. Thank you.
Fantastic, Daniel.
Jonathan, I'm back. I had a technical glitch, so thank you for that.
No problem. Mike Bewer, take it away.
Great. Hello, I'm Michael Bewer, CEO of Cavallo. Our name comes from a surprising link between Da Vinci and Grand Rapids, Michigan, our home city. I've now had the honor to meet some true profit gurus in distribution, including Dr. Bates and the team at DSG. Another is our founder, a distributor himself who deeply understood the science of profit. Next slide, please, Jonathan. He realized that the money-making secret is to master the profit variables inside every order every time. So he built technology to do exactly that. First for himself, then for others. His results were extraordinary, and he cut his work hours in half. Here's a simple way to visualize the problem. On the left is a single profit-maximizing order, represented by this simple green square. Our founder aimed for 2,500 perfect orders per week. But here's the challenge. Most distributors are flying blind. They don't actually know if every order is maximizing profit or unknowingly bleeding margin. The reality, Profit is leaking from many orders, easily fixable with the right technology. Next slide, Jonathan. Now, stack up 52 weeks of orders, and you likely have over 1 billion data points. This is decision-making fuel that must be leveraged to drive maximum profitability. Next slide. This is where Cavallo's customer order intelligence platform comes in. It has 3 core capabilities for profit maximization. The first is real-time defect detection, spotting orders that are leaking profit right now. 2, profit control. Think of it as an order GPS, guiding every order and every line to max profitability. And 3, deep insights, turning 1 billion data points into decision-making gold, ensuring no profit opportunity is left behind. Next slide. That's Cavallo in a nutshell. Here are 3 ways to reach us if you'd like to maximize your profits on every order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for sponsoring our webcast today. I'd like to introduce Ranga Bodla from Oracle NetSuite next.
Thank you, Jonathan, and it's great to be back and speaking to this audience. I'll go quickly. You already kind of got a little bit of background from the network guys, which obviously support NetSuite. I think the big thing I want to bring out to you, if you aren't familiar with NetSuite, we've been around for a long time now, 26 years and counting, but really founded, in 1998 with the premise of providing a single suite of applications to run your business, and really that notion of a single source of truth. And particularly in the environment that we're in, where volatility is the word of the day and will continue to be so, it's really important for you to be able to understand in real time what is happening in your business. What are your cost of goods sold? Where are your margins? And how can you make decisions quickly? And you really need to have an application that provides that visibility, and NetSuite is really that key partner for that. If you go to the next slide, Jonathan, the other big thing is you should know that 41,000 customers trust NetSuite every day in, day out to run their business across a myriad of industries. And as we see, the notion of what a company has really evolved and changed, whether you're a manufacturer, a distributor, a retailer, or some combination of those things, and NetSuite's there to support it. The last thing I'll just go on and talk about is AI. And I think AI is a really important element that all distributors need to be paying attention to. And NetSuite really has a unique advantage up here with the suite and providing the data that's there. The NetSuite data itself, the best AI comes from the best data, and we think the best data comes from NetSuite. And then last but not least is Oracle. And we are built within the Oracle cloud infrastructure and are able to leverage all those capabilities that Oracle brings to bear around AI, and that's really a key critical element. We hope you will keep in touch with us. Feel free to connect with us either via LinkedIn, via our website, netsuite.com, or directly to me. And Jonathan, back to you.
Ranga, thank you so much for sponsoring today. Definitely our audience should take a look at products from NetSuite, from Cavallo, and from Net at Work. I'd like to introduce Dr. Al, also known as Big Al Bates, who's going to take us through the 4 pillars of profitability. Hey there, Al.
Jonathan, delighted to be with you folks today to talk about the 4 pillars of profitability. Profitability is a key topic all the time, but I think it's most essential right now because there's a real witch's brew of things going on. The first, of course, is artificial intelligence, which DSG has been leading in the distribution area. And I think there's an opportunity to dramatically improve your business. There's also an opportunity to be left behind if you don't take advantage of this. But I'm going to also be a little bit pessimistic. This is how I got my nickname in distribution as Dr. Doom. There's so many AI opportunities. Which do I choose first? Which do I do second? Which do I not do? So I think there's a challenge in terms of setting a hierarchy. The second thing going on is the government has suggested they're going to reduce the regulations that we have in business, which I think should help us. But then contradicting that is the government's also said, we're going to play with tariffs, which might increase our costs. So there's a whole challenge of things coming together at the same time. I'd like to make sure that we develop a plan to deal with these, not just be successful without those factors. All right, what are we going to do today? So with that, let's go to the next slide, which says I'm going to do three things. Number one is I want to review what I'm calling the ups and downs of profit history and distribution. Distribution has a long history, and our company had to be fortunate enough to be part of that history many years ago. So we've seen data going back years in terms of profitability. And if I can quote Mark Twain here, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it frequently rhymes. And I think a lot of what we're going to see going in the future may be based upon what we've had in the past. And so I'd like to have a baseline on where we are, how we're going to improve. Number two, and it'll be the big topic today, is identify the key pressure points in improving profitability. Not too surprisingly, there are four of them. So we'll talk about them in terms of what they mean to distribution, how important they are, how you have to manage those. And then at the very end, we'll try to develop an action plan to say, hey, what do? We got these four things. How do we encompass these particular elements into our business going forward? So that's kind of our game plan. And for that, we need a company. And in the next slide, I've got a fairly typical distributor in the United States.
Al, I have an insertion here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's a Q&A button at the bottom.
Yes.
And we will take questions along the way. I'm going to try putting this in presentation mode, but we may get some black spots. So people, you'll let me know if we do. That's why I don't have it in presentation mode.
Okay.
Okay, back to you, Al.
That's fine. This is a typical distributor. Now, distributors have all sorts of characteristics, but I'd like to look at, in this particular company, a business that is like about 85% of all distributors in the United States. And it's got certain characteristics. One, it's got sales of $50 million. Secondly, it's got a gross margin 25%. Margins in distribution range from single digits to almost 40%. But most companies, 85% of them, are in that 25% range, more or less. And I'm going to argue that most of them need to improve that margin a little bit. And we'll talk about that as one of the drivers of profitability as we try to see where we're going in terms of these four pillars. Down below that, I've got my expenses, okay, 11 million or 22% of sales. And the real key point for right now is if you look at expenses, and this is true for every distributor of every size, shape, format, payroll is about 2/3 of the expense load. And if we're going to improve profitability, we're going to have to do something with payroll in our particular business. Now, I am not a cut payroll guy, so you will not see me ever saying we got to lower the payroll down. We're going to have to try to have the payroll be reduced in relationship to sales. And Jonathan, I've lost the slides. I don't know if you still got them up there or not. Okay. All right, there we go. Good. So I got to do something with payroll. The other expenses, I'm going to suggest nothing is automatic, but they're kind of as automatic as we can get. When we subtract all the expenses from the gross margin, I got a bottom line of 3%. Now, many people say, hey, our number's a heck of a lot higher than that. And it has been higher than that in the last couple, 3 years. And we'll talk about that. But longer term, generally speaking, our bottom line profit in most distributors is somewhere in that general neighborhood of about 3%. Now, we've also had some ups and downs with regard to that profitability factor. And if you go to the next slide, it's labeled PBT ups and downs. And there we go. And I want to look at history. Okay. And these numbers are all for a typical distributor. The high profit distributors do better than this. But these are the typical numbers that we see in and out, year in, year out. And I've got them broken down into 3 categories. The first is the old, boring history era. And going back again 30 years ago, but if you look year in, year out, the typical distributor made somewhere between 2 to 4 on the bottom line. During recession, it went down to somewhere between -1 and +1. Okay. In a strong growth year, when the economy was really booming, somewhere between 2 to 5. Typical numbers. Again, the high profit firms typically did somewhere about twice as good as these numbers. And what we'd like to say is, what do we do in our particular company to say, how can we move to that higher profit number? The second column is the masters of the universe era. Starting with the recession, okay, ending, and COVID ending, we began to have some real inflationary pressures. And those inflationary pressures drove profit up dramatically. And what happened is selling prices went up, buying prices went up, gross margin per order went way up, and expenses did not catch up in the short run. So we tended to have somewhere in the 4 to 5% range, again, for the typical distributor. I've talked to a lot of managers of buying groups and trade associations, and they kind of said that their members thought we solved the problem of all the world. We're going to be in this new world. We're going to be sensational. Everything's going to be exactly like we'd like it to be. I'm going to suggest that as payroll caught up, which it has done, we're going to go back to being the same as we used to be, okay? The back to the future era, we're going to depend on whether it's a typical year, a high growth year, recessionary year. We're going to repeat what we've done in the past. That's terrible to say, though. I'd like to say, can we in fact make the business a heck of a lot better? And the reality is, and I hate to say this, most firms cannot make the business better. Only those that get off their duff or get off the schneid, if I can use a baseball term, will begin to change their business and be more successful. And so we're going to be looking at an industry that's highly competitive. Typical firm going to do okay, not going to go out of business, but going to have what I would call adequate but not gigantic profitability numbers. Going to be somewhere around that 3%. And the question before the House right now is, how do we get out of that 3% number? How do we change the business for the future? And this will start the actual workshop part of the session. So if we go to the next slide, I've got a graph that's entitled The Impact of the KPIs on Profit Margin. And so this graph has the KPIs, and I have 3 of them. I've got sales, gross margin, and expenses. And on the graph on the left-hand side, my vertical axis, we're at 3%. So again, typical sort of firm. How's it doing? What's going on? 3% bottom line. Going across horizontally, I've got what happens if we were to improve any of these KPIs by 5% all the way to 20%. This assumption is if we improved them this year. That is, if we did 5% more volume this year than we did actual, 5% more margin than we had, 5% less expenses. And so what I noticed is my lowest line is the sales line. And what it says is sales is wonderful, but as we begin to increase sales, we'll have more commissions, more interest expense, more gas and oil. And so it's not fun and games entirely, but it certainly is a key driver of profitability. But it is, and you have to trust me on this, it is the least dramatic of these 3 drivers of profitability. It is, however, by the same token, the one that people get excited about the most. Hey, let's drive more sales. That's a great concept, a great idea. It gets people excited. They rally around the flagpole. They want to do better. It's a motivator, but it is, in fact, the least driver of profitability. The next line up, which is kind of the dotted line there in gray, is expenses. And what it says, and this is truth of the matter, reducing expenses has a bigger impact on the bottom line than does raising sales. However, everybody hates the idea of expense control. Okay, go into a management meeting and say, hey, today we're going to talk about cutting expenses, and people will begin to panic. So it's got a dramatic impact on profitability, but a very small motivational tool out there in the world. And so we need to say, can we offset these factors? And so I'm not going to cut expenses. I said that earlier. But what I am going to talk about is, can we manage the expenses going forward so that as we drive more sales, expenses don't go up quite as fast. And this is a major opportunity in distribution if we can channel it and put it together. Finally, the top line, and I'm kind of colorblind, but I think that's orange, is gross margin. And what it says is gross margin, more than anything else on the face of the earth, drives profitability. If we can get more margin on the same sales volume, that is nirvana. Okay, absolutely nirvana. Might be 9-inch nails, but I think it's actually nirvana out there in the world. So we'd like to, if we could, improve the margin, improve the expenses, improve the sales, and the hierarchy is kind of that way, even though we realize that the enthusiasm for these might be different than their profit impact. So in that particular exhibit, I'm only looking at profit impact. I'm not looking at the ability to motivate employees to go out and kill for the company. All right, let's see if we can.
So Al,
ahead.
one of the things that there's an idea that sales cures all ills.
Yes, I've heard that.
And we've heard that, right? And what you're showing us is, well, not quite, or not quite so much.
Absolutely, sales cures a lot of ills. Let me admit that, Jonathan. However, it creates as many ills as it cures sometimes, that I outrun my financial capability, okay? That I've grown so fast I can't support the inventory, the accounts receivable. I have to hire too many people too fast. It creates a lot of inefficiencies. But so I'm going to talk about slowly growing sales and getting all of the sales cures all ills part of the equation. That's a real challenge, though, to be in that particular range. All right, great point. All right, this is the key slide in the entire session. So everybody do me a favor, put down your cell phone because you must multitask. You think you can, but you can't. These are the 4 bullet points that I want you to have in your plan going forward. I've labeled them the improvement model, real areas, that is 4 real areas that you have to improve, but arbitrary goals. I just put some numbers out there because we need some numbers, but my numbers are arbitrary. And what we're going to suggest is if we do these 4 things, that company we talked about earlier with a 3% bottom line can be dramatically different. These are not easy to do, however. They're all challenges to do. But if we can do them together, we can be successful. Now, we're already in February. So now all I'm saying is you put this great plan together, go back and redo it with these 4 bullet points. I don't expect you to do that, but I'd like you to think about these 4 bullet points in your plan. Number 1 is increase sales by at least the inflation rate plus some safety factor. I use 3% as a safety factor out here. That's arbitrary. All I'm saying is you need to increase your sales by at least the inflation rate plus some small number. Okay. Now, when I'm talking about the inflation rate, I'm talking about the CPI. We may have an inflation rate in our product category that's different than the CPI. So I need my sales to go up, including my industry inflation, faster than the CPI by some number, 1%, 2%, 3%. I don't care what it is, as long as I do that. The reason that's important is almost all of the non-payroll expenses tend to go up with inflation. And if we can outpace inflation with our sales number, we can begin to offset those non-payroll expenses fairly easily. That was a bad word. Easy should not be in my vocabulary. I apologize, with less difficulty than some other factors. Now, as I said earlier, this is really all you need. But if you want to grow sales 10%, 15%, 20%, that's fine. But the more you grow your sales, the more we face some of the challenges of excessive sales growth. So all that's really needed to make my bottom line a lot bigger is increase sales faster than the inflation rate by some number. The second bullet point is the killer on this page. This will drive you absolutely nuts. I want payroll to grow slower than sales to create what I'm going to call a sales to payroll wedge. And I put 2% out there. I don't care if sales grows faster than payroll by 1%, 2%, 3%, or whatever. but I need sales to grow faster than payroll. When you look at this, it's easy to say, well, we'll do that. Here's my problem. I've got data going back, again, I mentioned, 30 years. If we go back and look at what happened with regard to sales and payroll, they have been joined at the hip for 30 years. If you look at your payroll to sales ratio in a specific line of trade today and look at it 30 years ago, it's the same blooming number. Even though we've had tremendous technological changes, we've had all sorts of things going on. And so we're going to have to rethink where we are. Now, many people say, well, gee, with all this technology we brought in, how can that be true? And let me just give you one little war story. I'm old enough to remember when we used to keep inventory records on 3x5 index cards. Jonathan, I don't think you're that old, so you probably don't remember that out there. But
You got me there, Al.
okay, Ian remembers. Okay, we used to have a cadre of inventory control clerks who were looking at a batch of 3x5 cards, and they kept inventory records on those. They had color-coded pens. Blue pens were fast sellers, red pens were slow sellers, and we kept inventory records manually. We computerized inventory, okay? We wiped out this cadre of clerical people, and we replaced them with 2 IT people, neither of whom had social skills. And what we ended up with is about the same payroll as we had before. We had higher sales per employee, but we couldn't control the payrolls percent of sales. And we've had this year in, year out. So this will be a killer, but we'll talk about how to do it. Number 3, increase the gross margin percentage, not the dollars, by some number, and I'm using 2/10. I don't care if it's 1/10, half, whatever, and I don't care how we do it. And again, not the gross margin dollars, but the gross margin percentage. I need to measure around that. And then finally, the last number on this page, decrease the other expense percentage, again, not dollars, percent of sales, by some arbitrary number, and I'm using 2/10 again. Now, remember I said if we got the sales number right, we outpaced inflation, this would happen not automatically, but kind of automatically out there in the world. And so 3 real challenges: sales, at least inflation, and some industries are having some minor deflation right now. Sales growing faster than inflation, payroll growing slower than sales, increasing the gross margin percentage, and with any luck, if we make the sales numbers, cutting the other expenses that are non-payroll as percent of sales. All right, let's talk about that sales to payroll wedge, because this is the most important factor we have. And on the next slide, I've got an example with more numbers than you can stand. And that particular
Al, question before we move to that next slide.
Sure.
Pricing companies will standardly tout improving gross margin percentage 150, 250, sometimes 300 basis points.
Yes.
Given those, and I think most of them deliver on it, by the way.
Okay.
Given the presence of that, why is the gross margin percentage increase relatively modest?
Because what I want to demonstrate is that even if we made some incredibly small changes, we could dramatically change the nature of the business. Now, if I can drive 300 basis points, and I don't want to say I'm a non-believer on that because I know they can do it. My trouble is I may be doing that for my competitor as well, and we end up maybe back where we started from. So if I can do something my competition does not do, I think much larger improvements are operational out there, absolutely. But I'd like to use small numbers to say almost, gee, anybody could do that. And if anybody could do that, I think would have a big impact on the bottom line. Okay, so I'm always, little things mean a lot. Let's look at this sales to payroll wedge if we could real quick. And what this says is I've got my current results, $50 million, 3-point bottom line. What if we had a 10% sales growth and my expenses that were payroll, just the payroll, went up 8% or 12%? So I've got a 2% positive wedge or a 2% negative wedge. And sometimes the negative wedge is caused because we open a new branch, we put 2 more salespeople out there in the field, we add products, and some expenses go up faster than my sales. But I want to start with the positive number. Suppose we had an 8% increase in payroll, accompanying a 10% increase in sales. So sales goes to 55 million, of course. Payroll goes up 8%. The other expenses, I have them going up by 10%. That's cheating, but I want to show just the impact of payroll. And what it says is the bottom line would go to $1.8 million or 3.3%. And I'm trying to illustrate what is the impact of this 2% sales to payroll wedge if we could generate it. The last column says, what if, because of the nature of what we're doing and some other issues, that we have sales go up 10%, but payroll up 12%, the result is the bottom line stays the same. And as a percent of sales, it actually goes down to 2.7. So to me, what this says, and I'm going to come back and I hate to be anti-sales, I'm really not. Sales by itself does not mean doodly friggin' squat. Okay, what it impacts us is how much payroll do I have to bite off to generate that sales volume? And that's really the key driver in life in terms of performance. How much do we have to spend on payroll to get those sales? And the challenge I see going forward with AI or with whatever is how can we generate that sales growth without necessitating more payroll growth? And if we can do that, we can change the entire nature of the business, which leads to a minor question. How are we going to do that? Which hopefully takes us to our next slide, which has 3 absolutely brilliant ways that we can drive this. Number 1, I'm going to talk about controlling or maybe eliminating the problem portion of the sales force. Now, Jonathan, you're much more up on AI and sales than I am, but I know there's a number of efforts out there to try to help sales activity via AI to focus on the right accounts with the right products, the right time, et cetera. I think that's wonderful. But I'm also going to say that in the American economy, sales is the most difficult challenge that we have. And we have a heck of a lot bigger need for salespeople than we have people with selling skills. And so I'm of the ilk that at some point we may have to turn the sales force. We may have to generate people who actually can sell rather than people who are just going through the motions. But I would certainly use AI. And if you have anything to say on that, Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a really great paper written about 10 years ago by Andy Hoare. I think he was at Forrester. Don't quote me on that. He was with one of the big analyst firms. It was called The Death of a B2B Salesman.
Mm-hmm.
And in that paper, he broke salespeople down into by a couple of dimensions. In the upper right quadrant were the consultative salespeople, in the lower left quadrant were the order takers, and then you had the other quadrants as well. What he was able to show was that the growth in employment is going to be for the consultative sales reps, the ones that are adding value. The order takers and the others were going to lose over time. Unwittingly, or perhaps wittingly, if we look at where AI is going, it is going to be moving towards that consultative salesperson. There will be fewer salespeople. Salespeople will have more revenue per employee for a variety of reasons. So I think, over the 5-year time frame between now and the end of the decade, we're going to see smaller sales force from e-commerce, from AI. We're going to see higher revenue per rep, higher revenue per employee as a result.
I think that's great if I can pull that off. I'm going to still come back to my operational viewpoint that if I look at 10 salespeople, I've got one prima donna, okay, who I love to hate. I've got 2 real pretty darn good drivers of performance. I've got 3 soldiers and I've got 5 non-producers. And so if we can migrate, as you're saying, from non-producers to those who really generate, that's going to be a tremendous change in performance out there with regard to sales. I hope that that's all true. The second thing is fundamentally altering order economics. And I've been on this kick for a long time. Ian has been on this kick for a long time. And we're both saddened with the fact that nothing's happened. That, we need to put more orders on, or more lines on every order. We need to increase the average line extension. We need to do all sorts of things to make order economics better. And I have been pounding this for at least 5 years, and I've been able to succeed in doing nothing to improve performance. So I think it's still a bullet point. It's still something we ought to do, but we just haven't been able to do it, largely because it requires a lot of analytical work that may be too difficult for us right now in our particular computer systems that we have. Then finally, I want to work with customer set to change behavior. And as probably everybody in the audience knows, about half our customers are unprofitable. And there's a couple of philosophies about that. One is get rid of half of them. I think that's a terrible idea. Okay, I think we should probably get rid of about 2% of our customers, because 2% of our customers we lose money on, and they're glad we lose money. But the rest of them really would like to be profitable for us. This is where I think AI could come to the party, and I've not seen this done yet. But in terms of all these unprofitable customers, half our customer set, somebody's got to go out and change their behavior. Some customers are unprofitable because they order too frequently. Some are unprofitable because they have too many special orders. Some have too many returns. Some pay us slow. And I think AI could do a great job of sorting customers into like categories, in which my sales rep could then go out and tell a similar story to a large number of customers at the same time, and maybe improve performance. I need more volume per customer, and I need more profit per customer as well. So I think that's a tremendous AI opportunity, which I've not seen anybody focus on as of yet. All right. So that's the sales to payroll wedge, which is one of my key bullet points, and one I said might be one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, to generate. I want to turn right now to gross margin, where there is a lot of opportunity. And I want to look at, it says improving gross margin percentage by either buying or pricing. And so this is kind of door one or door two. And in door number, in the current column, excuse me, not door number one, I got a 25% gross margin. In the door one and door two, I'm going to raise that gross margin to 25.5%. That's beyond my crummy little 2/10. So 25.5 out there in the world. If I buy it cheaper, going down the column, the sales are going to stay 50 million, but I'm going to buy the product $250,000 cheaper. That $250,000 is going to go right to the gross margin line. And my variable expenses, which are sales commissions, oil and gas, interest on accounts receivable and inventory, are going to stay the same because it's the same sales number. The fixed expenses always stay the same, and the entire 250 goes to the bottom line. The right-hand side says, suppose we go through the pricing door number two, pricing, and I'm going to get the same 25.5% gross margin, but I'm going to do it a different way. In this particular column, go to the cost of goods first. I'm going to keep it at 37.5. So I'm not going to change my cost of goods. I'm going to raise my prices to 50,300,000 and I can't read that because my eyes are shot.
50,335,000.
Yes, thank you. And that means my gross margin is going to go to 12,835,000, which is in fact 25.5. My variable expenses are going to go up, but then I got more sales volume, more commissions, more interest on accounts receivable. My bottom line, though, becomes 1,818,000. And what this says is buying it cheaper is nifty. Selling it higher is niftier. Now, clearly, we have to do both things at the same time. But I want to emphasize from my perspective, and this is where you can talk about AI a little bit in this area, it's got to be outbound. Outbound is a bigger impact on the bottom line than is inbound. And I would argue, and distributors will argue with me here, I would suggest that it's actually easier outbound because I can do it by myself. Inbound, I've got to get some supplier to agree to sell it to me cheaper. And distributors are pretty good at whining for lower prices, but I think I've got more opportunity and more potential doing it myself on the outbound side. And this again, in terms of what can be done, is where I think AI brings a lot to the party. And that takes us to the next slide, which addresses that whole issue of how are we going to get the gross margin up. Okay. And I see a number of situations that arise in distribution. One is we buy it cheaper, particularly at the end of the quarter, or more importantly, at the end of the year. But instead of putting that money in our pocket, okay, we lower our prices outbound because we've got some sort of computer system that lugs in a lower cost of goods and automatically generates a lower outbound selling price, and we don't generate the additional margin that we should from these opportunistic buys. That's an opportunity. Secondly, raising prices where I can. And this gets us clearly to the extended long tail on the product line. And this is where I think AI might have a tremendous amount to bring to the party in terms of improving our gross margin. That there's all sorts of opportunities to raise prices on slow moving items, but we seem to be hesitant to do so because we're not sure we can get away with it. I think AI can help you identify opportunities where you might be the only supplier. There might be no price information out there. Lots of opportunities to improve profitability on the pricing side, on the slower product selection. Thirdly, controlling the sales force once again, because a lot of time the ineffective salesperson is also the one that gives the product away. So I'm coming back to, if I got a bad salesperson, better to get rid of them and replace them than it is to keep them, lowering profit all along. Distributors argue, gee, it's tough to do that because I've got to find a new salesperson, I've got to train them, I've got to have lower sales productivity in the short run. And my argument is that's a one-time expense. Ineffective sales is a lifetime expense. And finally, capitalizing on supplier price increases. If we ever get back to inflationary environment, which we very well may, we ought to make sure we pass those price increases along. So those are opportunities I think we need to look at and make sure we're building off of those as well. Jonathan, comments are?
Yeah, I think the devil's in the details on these.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, you've pointed the direction on a lot of these, and where the opportunities are. I think it just requires a very tough-minded execution approach to getting these things to happen, however painful they may be.
Absolutely. This is why, again, I don't want to be Dr. Doom again, but what I said earlier, I think the typical distributor is not going to make these changes. I think the high profit, more sophisticated, better motivated, I don't want to say better educated, but certainly more dynamic distributor is going to make changes and dramatically improve their profit. Okay. All right. Let's conclude by talking about what if we do these things I talked about? What is the payout out there in the world that we might be able to generate? And so this last exhibit, or next to last exhibit, says the mandate for change during each of the next 5 years. I stole that term, mandate for change, from the United States Congress, which means I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm not going to help. So here's your mandate each year, 5 years. Net sales, 5%. That was me saying not 5%, but the inflation rate, which is maybe 2% if we get lucky, plus my 3-point faster sales growth than inflation growth, gives me 5%. It's a modest number. A lot of distributors look at that number and say, it's way too small. It could still drive profitability. Gross margin, 0.2%. Sales to payroll gap, 2 points. Other expense percentage, down 0.2. And then inventory turnover and collection period, 0. We don't have to do anything with turnover or collections because they drive cash flow. The things that drive profit are sales, margin, and expenses. Well, what if we did those? What would be the impact in our particular business if we did that? And that takes us to the last slide that we have, which is the result of making these changes every year for 5 years. And I've got where we are right now. So I've got our results for this year, assuming we don't do anything, 3% bottom line, $50 million of sales. If we increase sales by 5%, 52.5 next year, and in the year of our Lord 2030, 63 million and change. That's 5% compounded. The gross margin is going to go from 25 to 25.2 to 26. Now, maybe I can do a heck of a lot more than that, and the more I can, the better off. But what I'd like to demonstrate, if I just did modest changes, I can change the nature of the business. Payroll, I want to talk about this in two contexts. First, go to the dollar numbers. Payroll is 7.5 million. It's going to go to 7.725, and it's going to continue to go up. I am not lowering payroll. I promised you earlier I would not lower payroll. I'm going to not do that. But if we go down to payroll as a percent of sales, it is falling slightly because I am driving sales up faster than payroll, and it goes from 15 to 13.6. Other expenses, same story, going up in dollars, going down as percent of sales. And if I look at my bottom line, 3% goes to 3.7, ends up at 6.4. I honestly believe, because I'm too stupid to know otherwise, that the typical firm out there, if it could put together a plan that is systematic, revolving around these 4 pillars that we talked about, could in fact double the bottom line. I hate to be pessimistic, but most firms are not going to do that. As you know, Jonathan, I do convention presentation and buying group presentations all the time. Every time I do a presentation, I put this out there and say, you need to improve performance. Everybody in the audience raises their hand and says, I've got religion. I'm going to change this business. We're going to be in great shape. We come back the next year and do another benchmarking survey, and most companies have done nothing. I need to have a motivational fact to get me moving.
So why do you think they come away with this enthusiasm and then they don't get the results?
I think that part of the problem is, and I go back to my business, and I'll use an old terminology, I've got 35 pink phone messages to return, okay? I've got 38 problems in the business, and I just lose sight of making the changes. I get so hung up with running the business day to day. I cannot put my eyes around or my arms around, can we change the business for the future? It's also, Jonathan, as you mentioned earlier, it's hard to do, okay? I got to make these systematic changes, and I got to make a lot of those systematic changes, not one at a time, but all at the same time. So maybe there's a little of human nature I don't want to change, but I think I'm just overwhelmed operationally and don't spend the time to set aside and say, how are we going to change this business, not operationally, but strategically?
Okay, so for the ones who are successful, what do you notice about the characteristics of those companies that are able to make this adjustment?
Let me phrase this judiciously for people who may be listening. We have younger, newer management. Okay. You know, I'm an old coot, and most of the people I meet at conventions are old coots who ain't going to change nothing because we've done it this way for the last 35 years. Okay. I need a new, younger, I don't want to say more dynamic, but more willing to change management team that says, you know, 3 is okay. We could make 3-point bottom line. We could make it forever, but I'd like to be in a more dynamic sort of business. Those who do not view wholesaling as just a place to spend time, but a place to make a series of dynamic businesses. So
question, or just comment, which is, the modest changes after 1 year are already dramatic to the bottom line.
Yes, and you get a 1-year payout.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and you've grown the profitability, 24, 25% in 1 year with just these modest changes. And then the final column is the compounded effect.
right.
And again, modest changes over a 5-year period doubles the profit before taxes.
Yes, and I'm always, again, this is my bias. I'm always a slow but steady wins the race guy. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always, I guess I've been burnt too many times in my old past consulting life. When I was a young buck and I was going to change the world, we always talked about you got to go out there and make 25% changes this year. And I went out with companies and made 25% changes, and they blew up the company. So I've kind of retreated back to let's build some things that we can do. We know we can do these things, and if we do them, we'll build a new base. And we'll build that new base again next year and the year after and the year after. So it's just, I guess, the bias I have in life. I think I can do it slowly and systematically.
Works for me, and I think it works for a lot of our audience, Al. Al, thank you so much for yet another enlightening session on distributor profitability. We look forward to future such sessions. The video from today will be available on demand within 24 hours, and then there will also be a white paper / blog that comes from this session today, probably within about 3 weeks. I wanted to share a couple of other upcoming pieces with you. A week from today, we have the Distributor's Technology Dream Stack, sponsored by Oracle NetSuite, Net at Work, Spiro, and ECI Evolution X. This will be a fascinating roundtable. All of the people participating have a lot to share, so I think we'll enjoy that discussion. And then February 19th, 2 weeks from today, New Imperatives in Digital Strategy for Distributors, sponsored by Infor and HawkSearch. So we look forward to seeing you on a future session. And let's see, do we have a question here? Oh, yes. So we just had a thank you for the great session to Al. And the slides will not be shared, just the video and the white paper. Okay, everybody, have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. And we look forward to the next session with you. All the best.